Hello, everybody. Welcome to Wow Week. I'm Wendy Perrin, and we're so glad that you're here for our final travel talk of Wow Week. We've saved the best for last. We're very excited to have two of my favorite people in the world, not just in the airline world, but in the world with us today. Before we get started, I just want to give a final thank you to our sponsor of Wow Week, MedJet. MedJet is a travel emergency assistance membership that I've had for many years, ever since my kids were little. And basically, if you're stuck in a hospital overseas, whether with COVID or something else, they will get you back home to the doctor and hospital you trust so that you can be with your family or wherever it is that you want to be. So we're very grateful to MedJet for sponsoring this series of travel talks. We're going to be publishing all of this week's travel talks in case you missed any of them. We're going to be publishing on the website and sharing them in our newsletter. So you can look out for those. And now I am going to hand this over to Billy on the team. Billy, you'll say a quick hello and then take over. So thank you so much, everybody. Thank you again.
Hey everyone, good to have you all here again for our last talk of Wow Week. And yeah, we did save the best for last. Everybody always loves hearing about what's going on with air travel. So we have two of our favorite air travel gurus here. I'm going to introduce them while they blush a little bit. So we have Gary Lev. He is the guru about points and miles, whether you're talking about air travel or car rentals or hotels or credit cards. He's the guy who knows. He writes all about it every day at View from the Wing, which is a travel site for frequent flyers that specializes in miles and points knowledge. And he also runs Book Your Reward, which is a service that, like it says, finds the best options for miles and points travel. So we're psyched to have you here, Gary. Thank you. And we also have Brett Snyder, who there he is, who runs Cranky Flyer, which is a site that has all kinds of great content about the airline industry and air travel, podcasts, newsletters, and then he also runs Cranky Concierge, which is an air travel assistance service. So not only do they help you find the best flights for your trip, but once you have them, they monitor them. So if something goes wrong or a schedule changes, they let you know. And also if you get caught in an emergency situation, like your flight is canceled and you're standing in the airport, you can call them for emergency assistance. So both Brett and Gary are really great helpers to have in your corner when you're traveling anytime, but especially these days. So that's who we have with us today, and we're so glad. I have a bunch of questions that came in from people ahead of time, so I'm going to go through those, and then we're also going to take questions from the Q&A box. So just a reminder, we would love to hear all your questions if you have them. Put them in the Q&A box and the Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen rather than the chat box, because that's where Brooke will see them and monitor them. So enough talking, let's get started. And I want to start with the main topic that everybody is wondering about, which is pricing. Is there anywhere in the world that you can get affordable airfare these days? So Brett, fuel prices are up. What is the outlook for international airfare now in the near term and the long term?
Well, it's not cheap as a general rule of thumb. You have a few things going on here, and it's not really as much about fuel. That is, of course, an important cost input, but it's really just demand. People want to travel. We've all been cooped up for way too long. And so, you just have this really strong interest this summer. We've seen huge bookings. And then you also have the issue that some airlines are kind of constrained. They have crew shortages, some have aircraft shortages, and so they may not even be able to fly the full schedules that they want to fly to meet the demand. So that means pricing ends up going up.
Then the other thing that's in the news these days is the mask mandate. So that has ended. So Gary, how are airlines dealing with that? And should people be choosing an airline based on what their masking policy is? And if they want to do that, how do they even find out which international airlines, still have a mask mandate or what the rules are?
So this gets confusing because if you're flying a US airline domestically, you're not going to be required to wear a mask. If you're flying to a destination that requires it, that mask, the requirement may be there, but the enforcement by U.S. airlines can vary kind of a bit. But the destination based airlines will tend to be somewhat stricter. Canada still has mask requirements for flying, for instance. If you're going to go to Australia, right, those are still in place. So it's really going to be driven by the destination. And I think if you're someone who's looking for more masking, I think that the place to start is to get yourself a better mask. I mean, maybe you're already doing that, but the folks who are around you aren't. Something that we were talking about earlier that I mentioned was that because the requirement with U.S. airlines no longer exists, the requirement about what masks you're allowed to wear doesn't either. So if you want to wear an N95 mask with a valve, right? So you weren't really comfortable with the N95, before, you can wear it now with the valve. That'll help a little bit. I mean, you can even wear a P100 mask, like, may not look like the look of it, but with the valve, this is permitted now, right? So you can actually get yourself better protection rather than being in a position where you're relying on, whether or not the people around you have that. And Brett earlier made the point that even when the airlines do say, and it's right, that the cabin environment is pretty protective, especially in the air and even on the ground with some aircraft. Airbus narrow bodies are going to actually benefit from HEPA air filtration on the ground when the aircraft engines aren't turning. 737s also, as I understand it, but the airport itself is a different environment. So maybe wear the mask in the airport, maybe wear it on the jet bridge, even if you're not going to wear it on the plane.
And how do travelers find out what that masking policy is for the flight that they're going to take, especially if it's a foreign airline?
Spin the wheel, just see where it lands, pin the tail on the donkey. It's not actually that easy necessarily. Honestly, if you don't necessarily care so much, I mean, you should always have masks with you when you travel, right? You never know when you're going to need these anyway. So just be prepared. But if you're trying to seek it out, I mean, you can check with the airlines directly that you're flying with. I don't even know, Gary, have you, are there might be some apps, some like the Verifly or something that might have that. I'm not sure, but I haven't really seen the masking piece in there.
No, look, I mean, it's for the most part, the official policy is generally going to be on the airline and on the airline website, and most large airlines are going to keep those up to date. Most destinations are going to have a page with their requirements, including the legal requirements for masking. The problem is that there will be potentially a disconnect between what the official policy is and how things work in practice. So, look, for instance, when I was flying British Airways in March, officially, both flights to and from the U.S. On BA were going to require masking even after the UK rule dropped. In practice, most cabin crew weren't going to enforce it. A lot of passengers weren't doing it, and so it really was you just don't know ex ante what you're going to get at this point.
Got it. Okay, so you've set people's expectations. Flights may be expensive and there may not be masking. So now comes the big question. When is the right time to buy international airfare? Business, premium economy. When's the best time to get it? Brett?
Tuesday at 3 a.m. Everyone wake up at 3 a.m. on Tuesday. Make sure that's it. We were going to just be open at 3 a.m. on Tuesday. No, so there is no day of week. That is a myth. There were times in the past where you could get web deals on Wednesday at kind of the early days of the internet and all these things. It's not a thing. And you may hear of studies that say that weekends are the cheapest, but those come from ARC, which is primarily business travel. And so that's because Monday through Friday, people are booking business travel at work, and Saturday and Sunday, they're not. So, that's why when you see some of these stories saying, oh, you should book here, you should book there, they're not really using the data right. So don't worry about that. The one thing you can think about, though, is how far in advance to book. not specifically like day of week or anything like that. And the answer is, it's a Wild West right now. So because different geographies, people are waiting longer to book than they might for others. If you want to go to China, I would not recommend booking anytime soon. It can really vary. The general rule before the pandemic for international was usually about 3 months or so in advance. There are people that jump on the 330 days or, right when you can first book before travel. That's generally not the best strategy for paid travel. Gary can talk about points and miles on that as well. But ultimately, the reality is you need to think about what's going to make you comfortable with it. Because if you're just going to be nervous about this and you're going to say, yeah, we're doing this trip, and the second it comes available, I just want to have it booked and I want the peace of mind, then look at the fares exactly when they start. And maybe you'll say, you know what, that's fine. It's great. Just do it and be done. And the other people who say, I can't take that trip where it is, I need it to be cheaper. Well, you can wait and see what happens. And the other thing you can do is remember, with most airlines getting rid of change fees now, you can always book a ticket and then you can change it later. You won't get the cash back, but in most cases, you'll at least get that as a credit you could use in the future. So you have less risk than you did before if you need to make a change. So
yeah, I want to definitely come back to cancellation and change fees, but I follow up on that. So you talked about the 330-day being the farthest out you can buy them. Can you sort of maybe go through, I think the way people, and I think about it is, should I buy the ticket last minute, sort of 3 to 4 months, or as far out as possible, and sort of the pros and cons of each?
Sure. Well, the further out you buy it, you'll be on the plane. So you'll have better pick seat assignments on board, all that kind of stuff if you do it further in advance. And then you are playing a little bit with fire the longer you wait. When you get really last minute, like this summer, probably not going to be a lot of seats left. We've seen really strong demand for premium economy for people that are trying to balance budget, but not sit in the back. And that's already not a very big cabin. So it's hard to find those seats a lot for this summer. And so, you're probably pretty late on that if you wanted to do it. But that's not always going to be the case, especially if you don't want to travel until after summer, because you don't want to be, with the hordes of families in Italy or wherever it may be. You get more into like October, November, a little more off season, then you can wait longer. And then you get to the holidays where everyone's trying to travel at the same time. So you want to, again, try and book further out. So it really can just vary depending upon the trip that you're trying to do. But one thing I will say about pricing, when the airlines first put their fares and flights out there, the fares are just kind of their general rack fares. They're not putting discounts in there for a year ahead of now. They're just putting general fares for people that want to book. The flights that you book will absolutely not operate with schedule changes that happen all the time. They're just putting placeholders in there. And, maybe that's fine. Maybe you book something then that you just say, well, I don't really care about this flight time anyway. Maybe I'll get something better. You can do that. But if you're really booking something and saying, I absolutely need to be in by 7 a.m. and it lands at 6:45, I would not count on that, because it really is a placeholder schedule that far out. And even now, we still see airlines, even like in August, that are still some placeholders that they're cleaning up. Mostly we're into the fall now, but it's a year out, nothing's accurate.
So Gary, now let's talk miles. When is the best time to book with miles, let's say business class or international fares?
So that's where the 330-day thing isn't actually wrong the way that it is with paid travel. By which I mean every airline has a somewhat different approach to when they release award seats. There are several airlines that will make award seats available as soon as the schedule publishes. I mentioned British Airways earlier. They're a good example of this. Every British Airways flight will have business class award seats when the schedule loads. Now their schedule loads, 355 days, I think. I have to go back and look, but in advance.
Right.
Right. And Qatar Airways now does the same thing, loading award seats at the time the schedule loads. Yeah, as Brett's point, they don't, airlines don't really know what 11 months into the future is going to be, the flights they're going to operate, when the flight's going to operate, what demand for that flight is going to be. So most airlines are a little bit conservative about how many seats they release so early. If the flight's going, what they ultimately want to do at the lowest price with miles is give out the seats that they're not going to sell for cash. Now, they may not give out all the seats they're not going to sell for cash because they don't want to make so many available that people use miles instead of giving them high fares. But it's unloading that unsold inventory is usually what's going to mean the cheapest fares. And 11 months out, they have some idea, but especially right now, it's difficult to be projecting demand based on those historical models. And so many airlines are more conservative about that than they used to be. And so it's kind of watching it. What I found that the biggest thing that predicts whether or not you're going to find award space is less about when you're looking and more who you're looking on, which is that the foreign partners of US airlines are much more likely to have award seats than the US airlines will. Many of them are restarted their flights to the US earlier than they might have based purely on demand for the routes. And so there are more seats flying empty on many international carriers than US airlines. And so those partners may be a better opportunity to find some seats, because when an airline like United or Delta or American is pretty much selling out all their seats, they're going to demand an exorbitant number of miles if you want to get on the flight.
What about change and cancellation fees when you're booking miles? So you're saying you can book kind of early. Should you worry about that?
So every airline program is a little bit different. Many airline programs are much more flexible than they used to be. Most pandemic flexibility policies have ended, but during the pandemic, for instance, American Airlines said, no more cancel and redeposit fees. So if, at all for any of their members. So you book an award and you decide later that you don't want it, as long as you cancel it a certain amount of time before the flight departs, you can, no penalty, put the miles back. United is, sort of similar. Officially, they still have fees, within a month of travel, but actually, in fact, that has not been it has not been imposed. So they have a policy of waiving the official change fees and redeposit fees, and they haven't said when that'll go away, or if it will. And so there's more flexibility with a lot of programs, but not all programs. So know the rule of the airline whose miles you have in that regard. I have had tremendous luck. I would just book travel when mileage awards are cheap and available. And if the trip works out, great. If it doesn't, I cancel the ticket. But I'm jumping on when there's great availability at lower prices. So when next month I'll go to Australia, Saver Awards, business class, Air Canada. There's been a couple times where they've just had 6 seats per flight for months, and it's probably a mistake, and it goes away in a day. Like I grabbed that. Well, given when I was booking, their policy allowed me to do it without a charge. But similarly, they have, for a few extra miles, you can have that flexibility anytime. Even going forward. And so, having that flexibility is nice with miles. I've booked as much travel as I can with miles, precisely because I've been uncertain about whether I've really been able to take a given trip or not, or someone might get sick and I'd have to change it. And even though change fees may not exist on a lot of paid airfares, I've still given the airline my money. I still may have a limited amount of time to use that credit, and it has to be with that airline or a partner that I can book with that credit. And so I much prefer to put those miles back in my account if I can.
Got it. And Brett, can you speak about how cancellation and change policies, where they stand now with airlines for paid fare? There was a lot of that during the pandemic. I don't know where it is now.
Well, I mean, it's fairly similar to what we've seen with points and miles. It's the regular rules are looser now. So very few change fees exist. Of course, you have to pay the fare difference and whatever it might be, but there is no extra fee added on top of it by the airlines. At least the US carriers and their partners, always check the rules anyway, because you will find some foreign carriers that way. And of course, if you're flying Spirit or something, and also basic economy, but I don't know that that's a real issue here. But still something to keep in mind. You should always double check, but there are a lot fewer of those. Increasingly, you will see airlines offer refundable fares at a not insane premium. It used to be back in the day, you'd have these cheap discounted fares, and then it'd be like 4 times as much if you wanted to get a refundable fare. Now they treat it more often as a bump up off of the selling fare. So, if it's $1,000, maybe it's $1,500. If it's $3,000, maybe it's $4,000. So, it makes it easier to think about buying up to get a refundable one if you're particularly concerned about it. If you don't do that and you end up having to cancel or change your trip anyway, then you just end up with a credit. And I'm particularly curious where this is going to go, because in general, as a regular rule of thumb, though not all airlines are the same, your ticket is valid for travel for 1 year from the day you purchase it. And after that, it's gone. The airlines during the pandemic have just been extending and extending and extending. Some more willingly than others, like Delta's through the end of December of next year. Americans not so happy about that at all. They want to get rid of this stuff. But if you can't use a credit in that time frame that it's valid, then it's just lost money. And so always still a very good place for travel insurance, because then if you do need to cancel for a reason that's not just, oh, I don't feel like going, which for most people it is an illness or a death in the family, or there are work reasons, different policies, different things, that's always a really helpful thing to keep in mind.
We talked about when to buy tickets, how to buy them, but now I want to talk about where. So Gary, what routes, what destinations are people most likely to find the best value for a business class flight or premium economy flight?
Right. I mean, so first of all, you're going to get the best value for your miles in international premium cabin travel. Both because, as I mentioned, finding seats domestically, even to buy, can be a challenge. Getting value out of miles domestically it has always been a challenge to begin with. Where you get the most value is the seats that are expensive to buy with cash, but that an airline isn't going to sell, and so they'll give away for a relatively low number of miles. And so you're going to get that most leverage out of international premium cabin trips. You're going to find the most empty seats on many international carriers that have brought back capacity earlier than demand might support. I've had great luck with awards on Turkish Airlines, for instance, frequently, where they've just got more flights, and look, the airline serves more destinations than anyone else, and so more countries than anyone else, rather, and so you can get to plenty of places on Turkish. There are many of the Gulf carriers, and Qatar Airways have had great award successes with. With them, it's either booking early or the availability comes in waves. It's not just you go and look. It comes and it goes. It disappears. Great recently with Iberia from the East Coast, their gateways through to Madrid. It's only for a couple passengers. You're never going to find more than 2 business class seats. But if you are using Iberia's Avios, which you can transfer from any credit card partners, you can move over from British Airways if you have an active Iberia account that's not brand new. It costs just 34,000 of their points each way for a business class seat, and so it's great, great value. So again, it really comes down to where are the flights that have empty seats, and I've had good luck with Air France on flights to DC, and flights to Houston especially has been a great one, where they've just had the flights and they're not filling up the business class cabin. So who has empty seats? And it's those foreign carriers.
Got it. Got it. Brett, speaking of international carriers, the nonstop international flights have always made travel easier, and more so even now. Are airlines adding more? Are they cutting more? And where?
Well, they're not cutting more on purpose. That doesn't mean they're not cutting more. So what's happening is, you still, let's take China, Hong Kong, all that sort of out of the equation, because that's effectively closed, and you will see them cutting only a couple months out. I think Cathay Pacific has cut their schedule, like, I think it's through June now, and that's it. And there will be some stuff you see out there that definitely won't fly, and you can't go there anyway, so it doesn't really matter. Or you may not want to go there. What you see with most airlines right now is that this summer they're trying to fly as much as they can. The problem is they can't necessarily fly as much as they want. So American's an example. There's been an issue with the 787. It's fine to fly, it keeps flying, but they can't take delivery of new ones. The government and Boeing are going through some issues there. So American is, I think it's a dozen aircraft short of where it expected to be at this point. And so because of that, they couldn't fly a lot of routes that they were hoping they would be able to fly. That might be places like in Europe, where we started before the pandemic, we saw some of these really heavy leisure routes start to get some traction. So Dubrovnik and Budapest and Prague and some of those types of markets, American just couldn't even entertain that option for this summer. Maybe if they can finally get some 787s, then next year that'll happen. But then you have airlines like United, which United has an enormous Asian network, and it doesn't need a lot of it right now. So it has more slack in its fleet, and it's adding all kinds of crazy places this summer that it's going to. They're going to Mallorca and is it Madeira? No, it's not Madeira. Ponta Delgada, the Canaries, Bergen in Norway. So they're really pushing out on that one and saying, okay, where can we go that, there's really no business travel here, but maybe we can make some money on leisure. So there's some pretty surprising places. It's worth it for people to take a look. And I think sometimes in their minds, people say, well, I'm going to Norway. So you just assume Oslo, right? If you're looking for that. But there's your Bergen flight. So something to keep in mind as a possibility. So it really is a mixed bag depending on the airline. But there is huge demand in their most important markets, especially where their partners are. So, American and British Airways, London, Madrid with Iberia, you have United, Lufthansa, so Germany, and so they really have done a lot to strengthen those, and then where they can, they add elsewhere too.
That's a good tip, to look where the partners are. And Brett wrote an article for us about the new nonstop flights that have come back in 2022. I think Brooke put the link in the chat, so that's really useful for going forward. Gary, if travelers do end up having to have a stopover, are there certain airlines or airports or routes that make that easier for travelers?
Well, look, gosh, I used to think that Amsterdam was a great place to connect, just because it's an easy airport historically. Recently, that hasn't been the case. I think, one of the things that I chatted with y'all about recently was about some of the interesting stopover programs to take advantage of, whether it's because the places themselves are, interesting for a couple of days. I mean, look, I wouldn't necessarily want to spend multiple days, multiple times in Doha myself, but I really enjoyed spending time at the Museum of Islamic Art there, right? And so it was worth stopping for a couple of days or 36 hours in Doha. There are what you often what you often find, and the Al Safwa Lounge that Qatar Airways has, their first class lounge, people tell me the photos look like a museum. In fact, it has pieces on loan from the Museum of Islamic Art in the lounge, which is kind of cool. But what I find is that often that when there is a national airline of a country that very much sort of promotes that country, they will have a stopover program that encourages people to stay. Maybe there'll be free tours or there'll be discounted hotels. Turkish Airways has one of the most generous stopover programs where if you're on a Turkish Airlines ticket, so if you're using United Miles to fly Turkish, this doesn't apply. But say you have Citibank points and you transfer, or Capital One points, you transfer them to Turkish Airlines, and you book an award with Turkish Airlines miles. You can get a free hotel night if you're an economy and you have a long overnight layover. You can actually do 2-night stopovers with business class. They have these generous programs. So look for these in the cases of these Gulf airlines in particular, but not only. And then anywhere that there's going to be a hub, often the fare may allow a stopover. If it does, look, if you're flying Air France, even if you're paying a few extra miles, an extra few days in Paris just isn't ever a bad idea, and it breaks up the trip, right? So I find that I'll spend more miles to get the trip that I want, which may mean visiting an extra place, lengthening the trip a couple of days, making it more enjoyable.
It's a good way to think about it. Thanks. All right, let's go to the Q&A box. We have a bunch of questions that have come in so far.
Yeah, so let's start, Brett, with you. You mentioned the expiration dates of credits that people have had. And one listener wants to know, she has credits on, I believe it's on American, that were extended until the end of 2022, but not quite as long, to make to the season where she wanted to visit Colombia. She wants to know, why are the airlines restricting how long you can use those credits?
Well, they have these credits on the books. If people are using them, they're not paying money. So they want people to pay money. And they've already extended them a pretty significant amount. Some, like I mentioned earlier, some have done longer than others. But it really depends on the airline, and some will eventually get there. They just haven't gotten there yet. American has really tightened things up now. Their latest extension, you had to be an Advantage member of the frequent flyer program, and so you have to put that in there to allow you to do it. I think they're doing that to measure how successful it's been. But the reality is that with American, there's a missed opportunity, because American opened it up and allowed anyone that wanted to do a name change. And so they're really trying to burn off those credits, but they don't just want to let them be valid forever. Unfortunately, at the end of March, they turned off the name change thing, so you can't do that anymore. But that was something that a lot of people that were stuck with these credits, they had taken advantage of that to just try and move it to someone else and actually use it.
Question for you, Gary. Is there a hierarchy of the best points within each airline alliance? For example, are Cathay Pacific points better to collect than British Airways?
So each program has its own uses and niches, right? And so the answer is going to depend on what you want to get out of the program, where you are, where you want to go. Taking the example of Cathay Pacific's Asia Miles versus the British Airways Executive Club. Look, if you want to fly British Airways itself, Cathay Pacific will often be fewer miles and will charge lower surcharges. So you can get those British Airways flights often for less through Cathay Pacific. British Airways and Iberia are owned by the same company, and yet they have these different mileage programs. If you were to redeem an Iberia flight with British Airways miles, it's generally going to be both more miles and higher surcharges. So that may make it sound like British Airways in both of these cases inferior, but it has its uses. Short flights are often inexpensive. Short flights and premium cabins on their partners, within Asia, within Australia, on Qantas, within Europe can be a good value. So the answer is always going to be it depends. That having been said, there are programs that are generally better and generally worse. Within Star Alliance, I think the Aeroplan program is pretty good. Air Canada's program. ANA, the Japanese carrier, has outstanding value in their mileage redemptions. A round trip business class, from say, New York to Paris, cost you 88,000 miles round trip. Now they will add fuel surcharges to some of their partner airlines. So there's a higher cash cost, but a great value in miles. They're an Amex transfer partner. I think that Asiana has a great program, but it's going to go away because it'll be swallowed by Korean Air, and Korean Air has already said how they're going to devalue miles. So I kind of put that one aside. So within Star Alliance, for most people, though, Aeroplan is pretty good. Most people in the United States are just going to use United, although you can do better. Avianca Life Miles sells miles really cheap. It can be a great opportunity to get those, discounted saver awards on Star Alliance partners. Just bear in mind, there's always the question of dealing with customer service when things go wrong. When things are great and you can do it on the website, that's wonderful. I don't love dealing with Avianca when anything goes wrong. Their phone service is, no bueno, even if you speak Spanish. And that's, sort of not always the case with some of the other, partners. So, I guess big fan of Aeroplan. American and Alaska tend to be the best in the One World Alliance. Air France KLM Flying Blue, probably the best program in SkyTeam, but in general, SkyTeam programs are less good than than other alliance programs.
Thanks. And you brought up customer service, which segues very nicely to another question we have. Should you buy direct from airline, from travel agent, or through sites like Kayak?
Well, let me put a plug in first before Brett speaks to this, because certainly in my experience, a lot of people are going to want to search for flights, whether it's using Google Flights or Expedia or somewhere else, to see what's available. You may not know that you want to fly United, so you may not know you want to go to the United website. But once you know who you want to fly, it's often a good idea to go directly to them, because many of these third-party sites really just put a barrier between you and the airline, and that barrier may not be super helpful. When things go wrong on something that's been booked with Expedia, you've got to wait on hold for an Expedia rep who probably doesn't know what they're doing and doesn't have any authority. And if they find out how to fix it, they'll probably do it wrong. And you can call United directly, and you may get charged for the privilege of their taking over the booking because you didn't make it through them. I would say, why are you booking through the third party? There should be a reason. So if you want to get an agent's help, that's actually when you go to Brett. Because you don't go to Expedia, because Brett and his team actually know about finding the best airfares, can tell you things like, well, no, you don't want to make this connection through this city during this time of year, or it's too little, you're not, there aren't enough backup flights if something goes wrong. They'll actually have that knowledge. It's what I always expected that we would get out of many of the online travel agency sites, and they really haven't built the capability to offer even mass customized AI-driven kinds of advice to make travel better for people. So my advice is, unless there's a specific reason why you want to book through an Expedia or a Kayak, you should use those for research and your own understanding, but try not to make your booking through them, right? Yeah. Go direct, or go to an agent, go to someone like Brett, who actually there's value add in working with, compared to some of these online sites.
Well said, Gary.
I will add a little bit here. If everything goes fine, you're fine booking through Expedia or wherever, because you never have to deal with them. The problem is, things always go wrong. And don't even think of this as just when you're traveling. Think about schedule changes. They've been such a nightmare, far more now than they used to be, as the airlines are trying to figure out what to do. And there are very clear set rules that the airlines provide to travel agencies that say this is what you have to do. The online travel agencies will often ignore them, or they will make up their own rules, and you will not likely get what you could get. And if you do, it's going to require significant fighting after sitting on hold for a really long time. It's not fun. The airlines directly, way better than the online travel agent world. Sometimes the airlines directly, though, can't get you what you're looking for. there's a limited universe of what they're going to be able to provide you when it's just one airline, especially, oh gosh, we just booked someone today that they're flying to Mongolia. Let's hope that's open this fall. But it's United connecting to Miat in Mongolia, right? Like, probably not going to see that on the United website. And so, and you may not see that even on an Expedia. So the true physical travel agent, those are people that have access to the full range of options that are out there. Like for us, we use the Sabre distribution system. We can piece flights together. We can say, all right, we're going to sell this flight in and then this flight, and we can poke around and we can look at availability, and there's a lot we can do there. So, if you're just going to Vegas on a quick weekend trip, probably the same pricing. It's Vegas. There's not much else that you can do to get creative there. But now you still do have to think about that idea of, well, what if there is a schedule change? Do I want to go and sit on hold with Delta for 3 hours trying to get someone to deal with it or not? And so there's that extra level of interest now, just because of how the airlines have had more trouble keeping up. But as a general rule, the airlines will be way better than the online travel agents if you have to deal with someone.
But let me also underscore that last point, because it's in general, getting through to airlines has been really challenging for a lot of people. Waiting on hold, you're much better positioned if there's an agent that you can contact, unlike Expedia, where they're going to have similarly long hold times. And by long hold times, Brett's not exaggerating when he's talking about hours. All day long, scroll through the Delta Twitter feed and you see screenshots of 4-hour hold times. Last summer with their elite customers, you were seeing occasionally 40-hour hold times. And then, not everyone's been entirely as bad as Delta, but quite often American will get bad. A thunderstorm in the summer runs through Dallas, and then American's hold times get really bad. It used to be that you could work around Delta by calling their reservations line in Singapore, but now they dump phone calls to their international centers into the same queue for the most part at Delta. And so even that doesn't work as a workaround. So if you just want somebody that you can actually call when there's the schedule change, like that's a reason to use an agent who works with air and specializes in air that you can reach. But absolutely better to deal with the airline to deal with Expedia.
Yeah. Question about company to work with to book around the world tickets. I haven't looked at those since I was a backpacker 25 years ago, but Brett, I imagine the strategies that your team has in their back pocket, do those help finding great around the world fares?
I mean, we can. The thing is, though, that the way the pricing has gone, the real value of the around the world fares are that they're more flexible. And so, you can make changes more easily and it books into a higher class. You don't have to pay. But for the most part, you may very well be better off just booking one-way fares to get where you need to go. And it totally depends upon what you're trying to do. But, you can get some really affordable one-way fares now compared to what it used to be. And some of those airlines, some of the ones like Gary mentioned, Turkish, will often have very low one-way fares. You have some of these airlines that are trying to do these sort of hybrid, like Japan Airlines. They have Zip Air, which is like their low cost until they've shut it down when they realize it's stupid. But for now, at least, it's their low cost operation. That's a nice 787. You're not going to get the fanciest service in the world, but it's still going to be really nice and comfortable. And there are a lot of ways to piece that together. So often the around the world fare is going to cost you more than if you do it a different way, just because the way pricing is gone. But those can all be done. You can actually do that directly through an airline. You can also go through an agent, of course. But if you want to go directly through an airline, they usually just say go to your home airline in that alliance. So if you call American, and you can do the one world round the world fares, and they also have like Circle Pacific fares, and there are a few other fares that they have out there. Unless you really want that flexibility, they may not be as important.
Oh, good to know. Brett, you talked about how airlines are going to change their schedules. You can pretty much count on it if you book a year in advance or so. How much leeway do you have to refuse the change and get a better flight day or time? What if it's only a few minutes change?
Few minutes, no. Unless the few minutes makes it too short of a connection and the airline doesn't allow it or something like that. It will depend on the airline. The different airlines have different rules. Some are very explicit. So, United will say if it's delayed at least 30 minutes, you can change to another flight, but you may have to have the same class of service available. And it depends, is it on United or is it on a partner? Something like that. Then once you hit 2 hours, then you could have the option of a refund if you don't like their option. Then there are also exceptions for if they bump you into a different class of service. We just had someone that was going to Dublin. They changed the airplane. They were in premium economy. Premium economy no longer exists on the new plane. So, on that one, take a refund and find someone else to fly. If they force you to add a connection, most airlines will let you refund. You can also change. Some airlines like Delta, they're squishier with this stuff. I think they think it's more customer friendly. I would rather have something more explicit because it just leaves it up to interpretation. But the reality is if you get something that changes, call it a half an hour, and you're looking for just a change to another flight, there is a decent chance that Delta would let you do that, but there's not a guarantee. So, the only things they put in writing are the point where you can get the refund with Delta, which I think they're at 2 hours for international, maybe 90 minutes domestic still. I can't remember if that changed, but everyone's different. And then the other key to this is knowing that it's whoever you booked the ticket on, which this is sort of an archaic point, but when we book partner airlines, I generally don't like code shares. It's much easier if you just book the airline that's operating it. If book British Airways instead of book American operated by British Airways. We've completely flipped on that now. We try to book code shares as much as we can because then it's an American Airlines ticket and not a British Airways ticket. That does a couple things for you. One, the American Airlines tend to have more explicit rules about what you can and can't do than some of these other carriers out there. But two, that means if you can't take your trip or you just say, wow, this schedule change is bad enough that I can't go, but it's not enough to get a refund, so you just have a credit, then you can use it on an American Airlines domestic flight or anything like that. Whereas if it's British Airways, you won't have that option. So the key is knowing where you book it, not who you're actually flying. And so if you can book it on a US carrier and you're a US citizen or US resident, you'll just have more options where you can use that in the chance that you can't do it. And this is a tangent. I've gone way off the original point, but anyway.
It's all so useful. It shows how much you guys have in your brains about all this stuff. Gary, which credit card mileage program is providing the most options at the best prices?
Okay, so it comes back like when we're talking about which mileage program is the best. It's going to depend on your specific use case, what you want to get out of miles. As a general matter, airline credit cards themselves are good to get. Maybe if you fly the airline occasionally, you're going to get some benefits, priority boarding, free checked bag fees. So there are benefits as a reason to get the card. And they may give you lots of miles for as a premium, but you will usually earn more miles with the bank cards whose points transfer to miles. Like if you were a Delta flyer and you wanted Delta miles, you'll usually earn more points with an American Express Gold card that earns 4 points per dollar at supermarkets and restaurants and 3 points per dollar at travel. And then you have the option of transferring the points to Delta or to other airlines. And so you can earn Delta miles faster because it earns more points than the Delta credit cards do, and you have additional flexibility. As a general matter, those bank programs, American Express membership rewards, Chase Ultimate rewards, Citi thank you rewards, even Capital One's venture cards as well, that transfer to miles are more valuable. And which one makes sense for you is going to depend on their particular partners and how those meet your needs. I generally like Citi's program a little bit less, but but there are some things that speak for it. Membership rewards and Chase's program, each of them have at least one U.S. airline partner with a lot of people like. Most of the best value will come out of using them with their foreign partner airline programs, but that takes a level of attention and research that not everyone is comfortable with. So they may want for example, oh, I'm a Delta person, I want to have the option of Delta and other things. I'll focus on membership rewards. And then it comes down to getting the card within the program that earns the miles fastest based on your spending. And I, in general, recommend getting at least, say, 2 cards. Right. So, because you don't want to be earning only 1 mile per dollar. So you get the card that has the bonus categories that best match your spending, and then a card that gives you the most points for the rest of your spending. Right. And my reason for why is 1 mile per dollar bad? I would never tell somebody go buy a mile for 2 cents. But since you could easily go get a 2% no annual fee cash back card, right? You're basically buying a mile for 2 cents every time you earn 1 mile per dollar on a credit card, right? So, what I will do, because I have lots of points in lots of the bank programs, is I'll earn across them. I will use, say, my American Express Platinum card on airfare, where I'm earning 5 points per dollar, and a gold card to earn for dining in supermarkets, and we maxed out that supermarket in my family benefit quite well. But the things where I'm not earning any bonus at all, I use my Capital One Venture X that earns 2 points per dollar on everything. Now, I'm not suggesting that having lots of cards makes sense for everybody, but I usually think about what are the 2 that are going to maximize earnings, and looking for the partners that you're going to want to transfer to based on who flies where, and it's going to have that availability with the ability to transfer to multiple airlines that you choose later where to put the points based on what you're going to want to do with them.
And Gary, you mentioned earlier that you don't like Amsterdam as much for layovers. One listener wants you to expand on how AMS is less convenient. For years, it has been my airport of choice to land first in Europe.
Don't anger the judge, Gary. Not good.
No, they have, in recent weeks, they have been telling people to stay away because they haven't been able to handle the volume with staffing problems. It's a unique situation for now that I would not expect to be an ongoing situation far into the future. But they have literally told people to stay home and not come to the airport.
So it's not just you saying that.
Yeah, but if your choice is Amsterdam melting down or Paris on a good day, wouldn't you still pick Amsterdam?
That's not wrong. Or for that matter, I mean, Frankfurt, I like Munich, but transferring in Frankfurt can be, or the old days at Heathrow, even British Airways to British Airways that might involve, 2 buses and a train, like landing at a T1 bus gate to a remote gate in T5, yeah.
Yeah. We got 2 questions in 1 minute, so let's see if we can do this. Okay, I've got upgrade certificates on American, which I purchased long ago, but just realized I have. I read that you can get $40 per certificate. I was gold when they were purchased, but now I've lost that status. I've tried to call American customer service, but just seem to get the runaround. How do I get my money back or credit on my account?
For American Advantage is 500-mile certificate for upgrades are going away. They're moving to a complimentary only system for eligible itineraries. So purchased 500-mile, they're going to automatically convert 500-mile certificates into 250 loyalty points that count towards status. If you purchased a certificate and don't want that to happen, American will give you an option of a refund of the cash. They've also been willing to honor 5,000 miles per certificate, which is quite generous, actually. People haven't seen those posts to the account yet. It'll happen. If you've got an agent that doesn't know it, you've just got an unhelpful agent, you'll probably have to call back and talk to them again. But lots of folks who've had at least agents who are aware of this process and documented the request to move forward with it.
Great. And does Cathay still have an 85,000 point around the world fare as long as you go in one direction? Neither of you know.
I certainly have no idea.
I
Oh,
don't
it's something.
believe.
Didn't think it was possible.
No, I mean, I don't believe so. Now that would be in economy and with surcharges and not nearly the deal that it sounds like. But I don't think that price holds.
Okay. Well, that we got through our questions in just about our hour. Billy, I'll pass it back to you.
No, thank you. That was great. And such great questions from everyone. This was really enlightening, really helpful. We will be putting up a video of this. So if you want to watch it again, it'll be there, or you want to share it with friends. So we'll announce that in the newsletter. So you can sign up for that to make sure that you get all the information along with all of our other Zooms. We'll be publishing those as well. We talked about insurance. We talked about summer travel. We talked about winter travel. We're going to have all that information for you over the next week or so. Gary and Brett, thank you so much. This was really excellent, really helpful. Always great to have you here and learning about what we can expect for airfare for 2022.
No, anytime you invite me, I'm here. I appreciate it.
And look, always happy to answer questions, email, Twitter, find me at youthwing.com.
Great.
Awesome. Gary and Brett, thank you so much. You guys are really, I just feel like, looking at you, as long as you guys are helping us navigate this new travel landscape, all's going to be right with the world. And I just want to thank also Brooke Wilkinson, who has been, thank you for fielding questions this entire week, not only in our Zooms, but also from travelers every day, dozens of travelers every day, sending in their questions. And also Billy Cohen, thank you so much for all your wonderful questions this whole week. Thank you everyone thank you to our audience for joining us during WOW Week. We'll be sending you lots of more information in our newsletter. We really appreciate your support all week long. Thanks so much, everybody. Take good care.
Bye.
Happy travels.
Happy travels.